Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You're listening to the What's Happening Muslim show, brought to you by the Islamic Vice podcast, and I'm your host, Majid. The Islamic Vice podcast is available on all popular podcast platforms and on my Path to Revival YouTube channel. And if you find the content beneficial, please share it with your family and friends. And it goes without saying, please don't forget to subscribe and follow the Islamic Vice podcast. Okay. So on to today's show. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother Rash and Brother JK. Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How's everything?
Alhamdulillah, yeah, good.
Good.
How about you?
Yeah. Can't complain, man. It's another week, another podcast, a lot to speak about. You know, a lot's happened in the last week. So inshallah ta'ala, let's kick on with it then. Yeah. Okay, so the first story is one which certainly for people who are like residents of the UK, have more relevance, shall I say? But many of the listeners would know already about a bill called the Nationality and Borders Bill in the UK, right? Now, many of us might not know it by its name, but we've definitely heard stories where British citizens are having their British citizenship removed and basically leaving them stateless. Okay, we saw this happen to our brother Tox, who is in Syria, and we also saw this happen to Shamima Begum, and I'm sure it's happened to many others. And to be honest with you, I think that the only people that have been affected by this bill so far have been Muslims, and I could be wrong. But I'm sure that is the case, right? Now, moving on to what we want to speak about today. Now, what we see is that there's a new proposed rule change, which has been quietly added to the clause to the Nationality and Borders Bill, which basically means that individuals, they can have their citizenship, British citizenship, stripped without any warning, okay? Now, this is clause 9, and this is what it says. It says notice of decision to deprive a person of citizenship of the bill, which was updated earlier this month, exempts the government from having to give notice if it is not reasonably practicable to do so, or in the interests of national security, diplomatic relations, or otherwise in the public interest. Now, I've got a quote here, a couple of quotes here, which I want to share to sort of set the scene. There's a Francis Weber, the vice chair of the Institute of Race Relations, and the comment which was made is that this amendment sends the message that certain citizens, despite being born and brought up in the UK and having no other home, remain migrants in this country. Their citizenship and therefore all their rights are precarious and contingent. It builds on previous measures to strip British-born nationals, dual nationals, who are mostly from ethnic minorities, of citizenship, and to do it while they are abroad, measures used mainly against British Muslims. It unapologetically flouts international human rights obligations and basic norms of fairness. And another quote by Maya Foa, who's the director of Reprieve. She said that this clause would give Preeti Patel unprecedented power to remove your citizenship in secret without even having to tell you and effectively deny you an appeal. Under this regime, a person accused of speeding would be afforded more rights than someone at risk of being deprived of their British nationality. This once again shows how little regard this government has for the rule of law. So, brothers, before I come to you and get your thoughts, inshallah, I just want to read out one last quote from the direct from the Home Office, which kind of destroys the idea that many of us have had that, basically if you're born in the UK, right, then you're a British citizen as default. So the Home Office says, British citizenship is a privilege, not a right. Deprivation of citizenship on conducive grounds is rightly reserved for those who pose a threat to the UK or those who conduct involves very high alarm and harm. The Nationality and Borders Bill will amend the law so citizenship can be deprived where it is not practicable to give notice. For example, if there is no way of communicating with the person. So, brothers, what are your thoughts on the latest? JK, I'll start with you.
Yeah, very another development. I mean, this is not something new. They've been putting this bill. These deprivation laws have been going on since 2005. I want to say, with mainly the reasoning being, the pretext being, is those who went to Syria, and easily enough, people use the argument that these people went to join ISIS, so they had a bit of public opinion from the British population that people should not deserve the right to come back to the UK, but that it wasn't reserved for those just who joined. We know Tox obviously went for aid work, and he was deprived. But the good thing, I mean, it was still unfair what they did to him, but at least he was able to challenge it, right? And at least he was able to know that they're doing this, and he could get his lawyers involved and things like this. But now this change is another step towards less rights, because they don't need to inform, if it gets passed, obviously, they don't need to inform the person that they're doing this. So anyone who might be abroad, they'll just do it, and then you just can't return. You probably get stopped at the airport or something like that. I'm not sure, but again, it just shows how these laws are becoming less and less the rights are being are being removed, stripped. They're being stripped of their citizenship and any rights that they claim to be a Western liberal country, but it questions their own values of liberalism and freedom and having the freedom to move and things like this. So I think that for me, I think one of the key messages really shows is this racism, obviously, from the UK government as well as system, because I don't want to make this just about conservative thing. Yes, it's a conservative policy. It's a very far right policy, a xenophobic policy, but it's not just about the party. It's a system, which we can talk about. But it really demonstrates this otherization. So anyone who isn't white, British, born, so you might even be born here, right? And still, you could still be stripped, because I was born here, but because my parents are Bangladeshi, they could strip me of my citizenship, regardless of whether I'm fully integrated or assimilated into their system. They have the right, if this bill passes, just to remove my citizenship without any notice. So it really demonstrates how racism is entrenched within their system. This otherization is part and parcel of their system. And the irony is that who's pushing this law and backing this law? Priti Patel, who is a child of migrant parents from India. But I think there's a message behind this. This is to show that if anyone accuses the government of racism, they will say, but how can it be racism? Priti Patel is pushing it. She's brown, right? So there's this kind of protection. They do this. A lot of the, Sajid Javid, Priti Patel, a lot of the MPs and people in the party and the government have brown skin, but actually they actually are the ones that enforce their racist policies, anti-Muslim, anti-Islamic policies, even more so than others. Go on.
No, I was just going to say that you mentioned it's racist, and certainly you can see it from a racist point of view. Okay, yeah. But I'm looking at it in a different light. It definitely there's a racist element, because you know what happened to Windrush, Windrush generation and so on. I'm seeing this as blatantly against Muslims and Islam.
Yeah. 100%, and that's what I'm going to get to. So I think, yes, generally it looks racist. So they don't mention Muslims or Islam in the bill, and generally you can say that it seems racist just from the face of it. But in terms of its application, they are definitely targeting Muslims, because firstly, those who have been affected by this policy are Muslims. So those who went to Syria for aid work, or for, even if it was as bad as joining ISIS, who we know isn't a legitimate group, but even if there were children like Shamima Begum, she was a child, she was groomed, you could call it, to join, and she even came out and took off the hijab, westernized, and all of this, and they still rejected it. There's still people still don't feel like she should join. So they're They don't care whether you fully assimilate or want to be like them. You'll never be accepted by them. But the way I'm looking at this, just to make my final point, is that why do they want to pass this law? Like, what is the reason, right? Because there's lots of things you can look at the short term, and they will give you reasons such as stopping people who went to Syria for whatever reason from returning, and this is the primary reason they will give, right? But I think, firstly, for me, it confirms this idea that terrorism is still a problem, right? Because what they're trying to say is if they return, they may cause problems here, there may be terrorist attacks. So what it does, it creates fear-mongering within the population. It creates this environment, it continues the environment of fear-mongering, hatred for Muslims, hatred for Islam, right? So that's one thing, in the short to medium term. The longer term, it sets a precedent. It sets this precedent that anyone who calls for change, anyone who challenges the status quo, anyone who they deem as not being British or holding British values because they want another system. Yes, we know ISIS is wrong, but anyone, if there's a future Islamic State, wants that, they can be stripped of their citizenship. They essentially become the enemy of the state. And that's what precedent it sets. And for me, that is a key aim behind some of these policies. And like I said, it started off, initially it wasn't that harsh, but slowly it's getting worse and worse. So I think this is just the start. It's going to get far worse, and anyone and everyone, any Muslim can easily be targeted.
Yeah. Rash, what were your thoughts, bro?
Yeah, JK's covered a lot of it. I think just to add a few bits really is, I think that's probably the way to look at it. It's not just about racism. It's about ideas police. It's like if anybody has different ideas to, like JK said, the British values, anybody carries anything different, then this is a way of otherizing them. And I think it's quite a clever way as well, because a lot of people, Muslims, non-Muslims, but mainly Muslims, will be thinking, I just want to get on with my life. I want to earn a living. I want to get, my children through school. And, most people live in that environment where they don't massively get involved in politics, and they just want to get on with their day-to-day life. So when it comes about that, if you have certain beliefs that are against what British values are, then it's a lot easier just to keep them quiet or whatever, rather than speak about them. This is why they push the whole notion of politics not being allowed in the masjid, and don't talk about politics in the mosque and things like that. Because what it does is it goes, well, if you whatever values you carry, leave them, you keep them to yourselves. As soon as you start speaking about them, that's problematic. So this bill, okay, fine, you could argue that a state has a right to decide, what values they carry, what values they want their citizens to carry, and how they want to deal with their citizens. At the end of the day, it is their country and it is their rules and all of those things. So, someone coming out and saying you should change your rules or this rule is not allowed, personally, I don't go about it that way. I would rather say that, look, to be fair, most of us are in this country. Take the Windrush. Let's just take the Windrush example. Why were those Caribbeans in the UK? Because the UK had a workers' shortage. The UK had colonized those lands. Those were colonies of the British. The British went and usurped their lands, colonized their lands. And then when they had a workers' shortage, they brought Black people over here to work for them. It was their need. Today you might, people go, okay, migrants and refugees. Again, why are migrants and refugees even here? Because your foreign policy has created them. In the past, your colonialism created them. Now your foreign policy is creating them. And then you treat them like second-class citizens, like we saw with the Windrush generation. So they came over here. They worked for them when they needed them. And then when it came to giving them their rights, they didn't. They treated them like second-class citizens. And that's what we are. We can have a red passport, and I think we've all got a red passport, but if our red passport is a different shade of red to the white man. Yeah. And when they want to, they can take that off us. So rather than us arguing that, oh, okay, why have you bought this bill out? Yes, what we're doing now is calling out the hypocrisy. Yeah. And we should do that. But I think I saw this video someone shared. I think you shared it, Maj, in that that guy from Bangladesh. And he's saying that, look, my father told me that there could be a time where they'll kick you out. So don't get too comfortable here. Yeah. And
he never said there could be a time. He said they will kick us out.
There will be a time, yeah. So he was like, "Oh, I thought my father was just being a bit naive and overly fearful." But actually, he's like, you know what? He was right. They could just revoke our citizenship anytime. And the reason why I started my point off about ideas is that's what this comes down to. They talk about terrorism, radicalization, and all of these things, but those are ideas that differ from theirs, and they want to associate it with violence. But actually, our brother Tox never got involved in anything violent. He went out to do charity. Yet, just because he might carry different ideas, or he chose to leave this country and help Muslims, they chose some of those things as a reason to revoke his citizenship. So I would stick to that route, and I don't get frustrated by these things because I expect them. Rather, you call out the hypocrisy and you highlight to Muslims that, really, we are second-class citizens here. We should be preparing ourselves or preparing our lands for us to be there one day again, be it us or be it our children or our children's children.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the ideas, I think that's the key, because like you said, we're not here to, get them to change this proposed bill. Why I think is important to mention and to highlight the hypocrisy is because, if you're living in a state that is just, say, a so-called dictatorship, you wouldn't even have this discussion. But when it's to do with the West, the UK, for example, places like France, who are meant to be, the enlightened people, and where democracy and freedom of thought and all this is prevalent. This is why you have to point out, because this is to do with ideas. And today they may link it to maybe someone traveling, but the reality is, going back to that quote from the Home Office, that your citizenship is not privilege, it's a right. Right.
Let me just quickly interject a second. That's a really sick point, because, like they criticize Islam because of its apostasy laws, because they go, if you leave Islam or if you carry different ideas, at least Islam is very clear. You can believe what you want to believe, but if you're a Muslim, you can't leave Islam, because there's rules behind that. But how is their way of life any different in that, anybody who now carries a different idea to them is a radical, is a terrorist, is someone they can, get rid of their citizenship, they can punish you for it, all of these things. So really, how can they say that, what they want to do is any different? They're still policing ideas. At least we openly say that this is what Islam is. They're trying to do it under the cover.
And that's the point. Like you said, in Islam, we will say, look, people cannot apostatize, for example, and these are the repercussions. And in reality, they could migrate to another land. They don't have to stay in the Islamic state, for example, right? There's nothing to do with it, right?
I mean, the point there as well with apostasy, it's not the fact that they apostatize, it's the fact that they publicly apostatize.
Exactly.
That's right.
They can apostatize, stay in their home. And
exactly. So that's why I think is important to like you're saying, Rash, that is to do with ideas, because like I was going to say that today is to do with people traveling and stuff. The reality is they're saying it's not privilege, it's a right. To earn that right, what do you have to do? Right? You have to earn a right, don't you? Yeah. And that right is going to be linked to what they've been talking about since 9/11. What does it mean to be British? Adopting ideas of freedom, democracy, human rights. Once you've done all of these, it's no longer a case where you can wear Western clothes, eat fish and chips on a Friday, and you're like everyone, right? You have to believe in certain ideas, then you have the right to be a British citizen. And the issue here, I think, what's really important, and it's a bit of a rude awakening. And there is an element of racism, and like that brother mentioned in that video that I sent you guys, he wasn't really talking from an Islamic point of view. He was talking about from a racist point of view, that they came here, they served, right? And you can probably see this guy seems very, very, he's very nationalistic, probably, right? It came across like that. But it's a rude awakening, because for a while, what we've been discussing and we've been saying, look, as an ummah, we need to look east. as an ummah, it's you know, this is a not a natural situation where in the past the Muslims have always resided in the Muslim lands unless they went out for jihad or for traveling or for just say trade. Right? They never really remained there, lived there, and thought that they were part and parcel of that society. And if we look at the reason why we're here, and Rash is a fantastic point you meant about the Windrush, we're here because they needed us. They needed our parents to come over here for cheap labor and whatnot, right? Obviously, it would have been even nicer, would have been that if we all became secular like all the other people did, right? Even they're not accepted and they believe the same, right? The fact that Muslims actually got closer to Islam, it became even a bigger issue. So there is an element of race and there is certainly an element of ideas. And that's why for Muslims, and you speak to Muslims today, and you know, it's difficult sometimes to try to explain, they do feel part and parcel of this place, and they really envisage that their future generations for on and on and on will be part and parcel of this society. But what this is really showing is, listen, in reality, you could be born here, you pay your national insurance, you pay your taxes, you could be, on one of your trips to Dubai, right? And next thing you know, you're not allowed to come back in the country because you're not even a citizen anymore. Just that notion, would that happen to someone who's Anglo-Saxon? Would that happen to someone who's white and English? Impossible. It's impossible. Maybe in the future, because of reverts, they have to probably, have a camp on an island somewhere that they can send it to them, because they can't send it to Bangladesh and Pakistan, right? But up until now, the reality is that as Muslims listening to this in the UK, don't get too comfortable. They're clearly saying that you are second-class citizens. And what happened to Windrush? We thought, yeah, they're a bit darker than us. It's not going to happen to us. And I'll be honest with you, in the past, you used to feel like, yeah, you got this red passport, right? They can't kick you out. You if you left, it'd be by choice. But the reality is now, like in that video, the father was saying, and like in the old times, when elders died, they got their bodies sent back to Pakistan and Bangladesh to get buried. They understood home.
Yeah, 100%.
We're a confused generation. Yeah. But I think they're making it clearer for us now.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think the other thing from it, like you guys are saying, that it is, the point here is about values. Because, you could be a serial rapist, you could be a serial murderer, mass murderer, right? You might be in jail, or you might have to face trial and stuff like that, but you will still have the basic right of having citizenship. Even they, regardless of their crime,
and a right to appeal, remember?
Right to appeal and all of that, right? But what the message is sent here is that this crime of wanting an alternative or having just different values, like I said, different ideas, different to British ideas and British values, this is the greatest of crimes. And it's, and that's why you can be revoked your citizenship. And it really ties back to the seerah, actually. Like if you take the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he first became a prophet, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to him, Iqra, read. And, we know the story, all of that. And the first person that he came to was his wife, and his wife took him to Waraka ibn Nawfal. And Waraka ibn Nawfal said to him, what did he say? The message said to him that this is a similar message that Musa alayhi salam gave from Jibreel. Your people will drive you out. Your people will drive you out. And he was like, I'm al-Amin, I'm a Siddiq, I'm the trustworthy, I'm the truthful. My people love me, right? The people did. The people loved him for his truthfulness. They'll never, I can't accept the fact that they'll drive me out. Yeah, they did. They drove him out. He had to migrate. They didn't accept his message, didn't accept Islam as a system, as a deen. Well, by and large, they rejected him, the Quraysh, and he was driven out, and he had to go to Medina. So what does this show? That even the Messenger, when this was a very tribalistic society, you don't cut your tribe off. You don't. This is not what you do. But what does it say? What the message comes across, that even the Quraysh, even the enemies back then, they would accept any kind of fitna. But this message, the truth, is unacceptable. It's truly unacceptable, and they're willing to drive you out for this message. they boycotted them. This is unheard of in their tradition, in the Qurayshi culture, if you want to call it. But they did it because of Islam. So again, this is a lesson for us to take from the Seerah, as the Seerah is, the whole of the Seerah is a lesson for us. This shows that it's coming, even now, for being Muslim, for calling for Islam, for wanting a different system, for wanting change. They will drive you out eventually.
Yeah, and the thing is if you think about it, over the last, since 9/11, in schools, citizenship classes and all of these ideas about freedom, democracy, accepting them, human rights, not being able to vent your frustration against certain ideas of liberalism that's being promoted now, or if you do, then you don't belong here. This is not a coincidence. It is really going down that route, and the important thing is, we need to highlight, because it could well be that there's non-Muslims listening to this podcast, is the fact that, look, why is it that, they can't just come out and challenge Islam intellectually? Let's discuss Islam. Let's discuss whose way of right is correct, right? Whose way of life is correct, sorry. But this is no different to when the Quraysh were telling the people of pilgrimage just to stuff things in their ears and not to speak to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Because he will separate fathers from sons and families and whatnot. They were censoring him, right? This is exactly the same thing. So it's like, you know what, we don't want to discuss with you. We can't challenge your ideas. Easy way is, right? And according to their way of life, to be honest, again, according to the UN, for example, you can't leave someone stateless. This is actually going against the UN convention, right? Yeah. So, but they're willing to go against all their own beliefs just to censor people. This shows how weak and false their ideas.
Yeah. They're so weak that that's again really good point about the whole censorship thing. That's what it is when there's a debate, someone's won the debate if they're saying, okay, I don't even want to listen to what you got to say. And that's basically what's happening. Another thing is, some people might be listening to us and going, you're going too far. The people whose citizenships they're revoking are just those people who they see a threat, like ISIS and all of these things, someone going away, terrorism and all of these things. And that initially is what it's linked to. It's the idea that, if someone is sufficiently a threat to, or an enemy to the state, then it's only at, last resort type of thing, we can revoke the citizenship. But people need to see past that. That's just the artificial, what's on the front is highlighting that. But this is, just ask yourself an individual question. When your child goes to school and when they're teaching them RSC and they're teaching them, that we need to accept homosexuality and you need to accept LGBT and stuff like that. When your child, when you're telling them that, no, you need to either stay away from that, reject that, not talk about that, or, you need to stand for that, you're against that, all of a sudden, a time might easily come where they go, and public opinion will be with them, remember, because the public opinion at the moment is moving more and more towards this kind of egalitarianism whereby, everybody is equal, homosexuality, feminism, all of this stuff is growing because of it. If all of a sudden you're one of the people pushing against the tide, what stops them then going, oh, this person's parents are from abroad, we're gonna revoke his citizenship because he and his children are causing, a problem in our state. It could get to that. It's not unrealistic.
No.
Yeah. So that's where, as individuals, as parents, as Muslims, we must look at it and go, fine, okay, initially it doesn't seem like, okay, it's going to affect us, but that's what a lot of things seem like that initially. And then over years, over time, these things go more and more and more. And that's why even there are some non-Muslims who will call these things out, because they see the pathway. They see that if you start now, curbing some of our freedoms for whatever reason, a time will come where more of our freedoms, that's why they call it draconian. Yeah. Whenever they talk about these rules, certainly if you read The Guardian and stuff, they always call these rules draconian, because it's the idea that they're very old fashioned and it's thought police, it's preventing people from having their own ideas. This is non-Muslims saying that because they see that over time we're heading back towards this kind of Gestapo style, thought police style society.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point, to be fair. Like, yeah, you're right. Immediately you'll look at it like, it's not really affecting me. I'm not going to Syria. I don't plan to go to Syria anytime soon. So how does it affect me? But actually, that's just the initial message. The point about values being questioned, and the fact that, and this is the point I was making, that yes, if you even look at just this bill, it started off as one thing and it's become slowly it's becoming,
each time
it's becoming more rigid. So what's to say in 10, 20 years time it doesn't become such that anyone even living in the UK is just chucked out, because it's like, you need to be of a certain British citizen, right? It's not a privilege, like you said. But I think just to add to your point as well is that when it I've lost my train of thinking, but when it comes to I'm sorry, I totally forgot what I was going to say. Go on, carry on.
I'd just dive in one thing and just say, it made me laugh really more than anything else, is the person who's pushing this, Priti Patel, as you mentioned. She's an open Zionist. She shakes hands with Narendra Modi, and she was caught having an unofficial meeting in Israel back, I think, in 2017. Open Zionist, open Islamophobe, open coconut, as it's termed.
Well, her father was a UKIP candidate.
Yeah, exactly. So it made me laugh. I was like, it's just, how much more blatant can they make it? How much, and yet people, thankfully people are calling it out, but these things will go through, and at some point they will affect people, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just remembered my point. So the point you're making about the fact that it can extend to any value that you disagree with, that really shows, as you guys were saying, that we shouldn't view it as though, how do we stay here? Like, because at the end of the day, what you're going to do is you're going to compromise everything. Because eventually what happens is that, okay, you know what, in order to stay here, I need to make sure I don't call for a alternative system, right? Cool, I can do that because I live in here, I can carry on with my life, I'm not going to mention this. Then it becomes, okay, but I need to now proactively show my support for liberalism and these things you were talking about, LGBT, whatever it may be. Okay, I need to do a bit of that. I mean, you won't want to.
I can give you a proper real world example, actually. Have you guys not ever bumped into people at universities and stuff who have come from like Muslim lands? And when you speak to them about certain things, they'll be like, oh, no, we can't speak about that, because they're fearful. They're here temporarily. They're thinking, if I speak about, say, Khilafah, or if I speak about the golden Islamic generation and wanting it back, they're fearful because they're like, I'm here temporarily. They can just ship me home. Or imagine you go into a masjid and the masjid has brought an imam over from back home and he's like on a temporary visa and stuff like that. You speak to them and they agree with you and they're like, yeah, but I can't speak about that because they'll ship me off home. Before, it only applied to them. Exactly. Now it applies to us. Because all of a sudden we can't speak about those things, or if we speak about them, then it doesn't matter that you're a British citizen, it doesn't matter you were born here, you carry different values, so we want to do the same with you.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important that the way we view this is not from okay, so let's change the law or whatever it may be, let's lobby. The way we should genuinely view that, like you said, it's a rude awakening that you're not accepted to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the Jews and Christians will never be pleased with you except until you follow their millah, their way of life. Until you do that, which basically means apostatizing from Islam, leaving the deen and embracing their ideology, their secular system, they won't accept you. So the way we should view it as Muslims is not from how do we challenge this? The way we should really see is that, look, we're never going to be acceptable to them. We need to think about what Islam requires from what is the alternative way of living that is acceptable to Allah, and we can live as Muslims without having to compromise our deen for us as well as our future generations. That's the way we need to look at it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really the couple of points you guys have made there is probably a good place to bring this segment to a close. And if I want to just add my final thoughts is really good how Brother JK brought the Seerah into it. If you want to understand our situation, let's go back to the Seerah, because it's just been played over and over again. And the same challenges that our beloved Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam faced, where they tried to get him to compromise. They, went to his uncle and said, look, get him to stop saying these things, try and censor him. These are exactly the same things that are going to happen. And as being people of the haqq, people of the truth, and standing up against falsehood, life isn't really going to be that cushy, in all honesty, and you're going to come across challenges. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts us through those tests and tribulations which we can endure and which we can actually be successful in, because you don't want to just pray for hardship for the sake of it. So I think that's really a good point. And and just now a final point is what Rash is saying, that if people are saying, well, look, it's only against trouble causes. The point here, and the reason why even non-Muslims are speaking out against this, is this is something which is unprecedented. It's something which was unheard of.
Exactly.
2005 they introduced it. At that time there was criticism. Where it's morphing into now, at some stage people themselves are worried about their own citizenship, whether they trace back that 100 years ago, 200 years ago, your father came from Germany. You know what I mean? Get back in Germany. You know what I mean? But the point is as Muslims, let's think about our identity. Let's look at the Seerah, and really let's question that. Look, whether our bodies are sent to Pakistan, Bangladesh, or they're buried here, that is really irrelevant. The real test is what we do in this life whilst we're alive, and how we overcome the trials and tribulations we're going to face. On that note, guys, let's move on to the next segment. And actually, to be honest with you, Brother JK mentioned a surah, an ayah, that the Jews and the Christians will never accept you until you follow their way. And actually, this next story is actually quite relevant, which shows that you can probably even accept their way and they'll still have questions. So the next segment I want to speak about is in regards to the Liverpool bomb attack, which happened in the last week. And since then, more information is being leaked, about the attacker, about the attack, that this guy spent months buying ingredients for this device, and, how this homemade device contained ball bearings, and, and as we know, it exploded outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital, right? Killing the attacker. I'm not sure if it killed anyone else, but it certainly killed the attacker. Now, I'm not going to go into the attack itself in much detail, but the story had a twist to it, which no one really expected, right? So once the news came out that there was this attack, as Muslims, we know here we go again. The usual accusations of being thrown at Islam and Muslims. How this event is being pushed as a terrorist attack carried out by Muslims who are probably linked to an international network of terrorists and extremists, right? But once the news came out that the guy was a Christian convert, it kind of bamboozled people, right? And it really completely threw the story off track. Now, what we saw were the newspapers and the front page. And in reality, they couldn't hide this fact because it was known now that this guy was a Christian. So, it did mention across all the major newspapers on the front page that, the guy was a Christian. However, if you read, listen, or watch the news, even up until now, today, you can still see that the propaganda is being pushed against Islam and Muslims, right? I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The first example which I came across is that even though this guy, he changed his name to Enzo, based on the guy who is behind the Enzo Ferrari, since converting to Christianity, right? In the media, they're still naming him as Imad al-Suailman, if that's how you pronounce it, right? And even when they refer to his conversion in the media, right, the way it's written is he is believed to have converted. And also the former lay minister who gave a home to this bomber, right? He was aware, this is what he said, he was aware that Bible meetings were being targeted by Muslims pretending to convert to Christianity. And a quote here is Malcolm Hitchcock, who was the assistant leader of the Liverpool's Cathedral's Iranian ministry, told an appeal tribunal, "I'm aware that there are some asylum seekers who attend church with the sole purpose of advancing their asylum claims." So, brothers, it so happens that even when the attack is carried out by a non-Muslim, and in this case, a church-going Christian, right? It just so happens that Islam and Muslims are the ones to blame. What's your thoughts on this?
I don't really know what to say. It's just it makes you, if you didn't laugh, you'd cry, wouldn't you? It's one of those. It's just every single time. You're right. That's the first reaction people have is, okay, if it's going to be a Muslim, then it's going to be back about, look at Islam and microscope on Islam and terrorism and those things. What I thought was interesting this time, just to not kind of say all the same things as we normally say on this topic, what I found interesting is some non-Muslims did immediately latch on to the fact that when it appeared to be Muslim, it was about to go down this route of terrorism. And then all of a sudden, as soon as it was found out he was Christian, then the whole stories about mental health came quite quickly. And that irony wasn't lost on some non-Muslims. I saw someone made like a meme type video that went quite viral about, as soon as you find out he's Christian, okay, he must have a mental health problem then. So I think people are starting to realize that, this whole idea of linking every time a terrorist attack happens to Muslims is very much a media-driven thing. Okay, plenty of people get pulled into that media, so they believe that as well. But I think more and more people are going, you know what? The media is pushing this. It's too blatant when they constantly link Islam to terrorism, but any other attack, they try and link it to mental health. It becomes too blatant. Yeah. And I think that's something interesting. And the other thing is, like you say, is maybe there's also this thought of like anti-religion as well. So it's Christianity and Islam and Judaism and whatever. So sometimes it's the secular onslaught on religions as well. So not terrorism, right? Even like a lot of the right-wing terrorism sometimes gets linked back to Christianity. Yeah. So this allows them to come across as less Islamophobic, even though they are, but it allows them to kind of blame other religions and other extremist ideologies just as a way of trying to prove to people that we're not anti-Islam. Yeah. So I think those are some of the things to consider as well.
I think that's right, because what they try to push is that religion is a dogma. Like religion is just blind faith. Like you just believe it, and it's got all of these, backward things, including bombing and terrorism and all of this. Obviously, it doesn't, but this is the message that will be pushed with this. And I think the interesting thing I found from this event is that when it comes, and I've mentioned this before, when it comes to terrorism, I mean, it's there for an agenda, isn't it? It's not a actual problem the way they claim. Not just the media, but even the British government. You'll find whenever there is an attack, a lot of it is either allowed or pre-planned, and a lot of the reaction is what drives policy change. Even this thing we're just speaking about, not just the previous topic about the citizenship revocation happened. The main push was after the London bombings. So yes, it pushed the foreign policy, but also pushes policies within the UK. So terrorism in itself is a pretext that they use to push an agenda. And as Rash was saying, one of the things they've done recently is that because it was being, even non-Muslims, others realised that why is it when it's only a Muslim that it gets pushed down this route of, we need to do something, we need to have policies like preventing violent extremism and all of that. They started to introduce things like the Finsbury Park attack, which was a right-wing attack. This potentially, which is like a religious attack, because it then says that it's not an attack on Islam. We don't have a problem with Islam, Muslims. We just have a problem with anyone that doesn't believe in secularism. And we know it's targeting Islam, and there's no similar attack on Christianity. No way. I mean, I would never accept this, but they have to push this message that they're not just against Islam, they're against right-wing the far right. They're against the far right. They're against potentially any extremist Christians, extremist Muslims. So it helps them in the message that they push, which I found interesting about that. Even though, like you said, there was a story.
But on this case, the truth is sort of revealed, because it's just hard for them to accept the fact that the guy was Christian, because
they're struggling to accept it.
They're struggling. You know, think about it, right? When a supposedly, apparently a Muslim guy who just does an attack, right? Who was a convert to Islam. Have they ever said that? Have you ever seen it written? You know, it was believed that he became a Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And on top of that, they don't start digging up what he believed in before Islam and blame that, do they? So if someone converts to Islam, Islam is at fault. If someone converts from Islam, Islam is still at fault.
Yeah, no, subhanAllah, man. But I think it was just worth bringing this topic up, because again, if we're talking about hypocrisy, and as Muslims, we need to really use this as a tool, be confident, and not only just be sheepish in our approach and just sit there and get, you know, punched as like a punch bag. Their whole way of life is full of contradictions and hypocrisy, right? And it's just easy to just point out. And like you guys have said, a lot of people are seeing it now for what it is, right? So, you know, I just thought it was a good topic to come over, because really, subhanAllah, you know, that the ayat of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the Jews and the Christians will never accept you until you follow their religion, their way, their millah. If you read the Ibn Kathir tafsir on this, he says that, in fact, even when people have left Islam to follow their way of life, they are still seen as with suspicion, because at some stage they were Muslim, right?
Not alive and he knew it.
You understand? So it just really goes to show that, look, you might want to bend over backwards to try to be accepted, right? And it's linked to the citizenship thing, and it's even linked to this, the fact that, look, you know, you can do what you want to do. You know, the reality is that if you're Muslim, or you have a Muslim name, or you have relatives that are Muslims or whatever, if needed, they can dig up anything to put you in a situation where, you know, you could have left Islam for 20 years and they would have said, yeah, he went to a madrasa when he was 5. You know what I mean? And he could have been the most secular person, right, you could find. But still, they would have linked it. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that rank hatred has appeared on their tongues, but what's in their heart is far worse. And that's why we can see the fact that whenever they have an opportunity, and we're just talking about Western media, bro, if you start talking about what's happening in India, that's a podcast in itself, right? It just goes to show that, you know, their hatred, sometimes it does, you know, come out even worse, because what's in their heart is far worse, yeah? So inshallah, guys, I want to just quickly go through one more segment, and I know, you know, it's getting on a bit with the podcast, but this is something which is a bit of an update from the last podcast. So in the last segment, I want to sort of continue from episode 30, which was the topic in regards to the racism and the cricketer Azeem Rafiq, who faced racism during his time at the Yorkshire Cricket County Club. But it just goes to show that, subhanAllah, man, things can change in a couple of weeks. So since we recorded the last podcast on the issue of Azeem, what's been revealed has been there purely to totally discredit Azeem Rafiq, the person, the victim, and the accusations that he made, right? So first, there was a comment. Actually, the message which was revealed was one where Azeem Rafiq was speaking to one of his friends, and he was using anti-Semitic comments, and basically he used comments which were, you know, highly insulting to Jewish people, right? Definitely, that's the case. We accept that. So it showed this guy as being anti-Semitic, right? It's probably which is probably worse than being racist in you know, in the way things are made out today. And now, in the last day or so, it's been revealed that Azeem Rafiq is accused of sending a series of creepy and vulgar messages to a teenage girl 6 years ago, right? So the Yorkshire Post claimed that they've uncovered screenshots of the conversation which show messages sent from Rafiq's phone number to Gayatri Ajit, who has come forward with her explosive revelations, right? So Ajit claims to have met Rafiq who was then age 24, 3 months earlier on a flight from Manchester to Dubai, when she told the former spin bowler she was 17 in order to seem a bit older, which is a bit odd anyway, because already she's telling him she's 17, right? But this is what she said. She said, I'm not disputing any of his racism claims because I'm sure they're very true experiences, but certain aspects of what he said just don't really sit right with me. If he was being forced to drink by his teammates, then surely that wouldn't then mean he would be drinking alone on a flight and encouraging a 17-year-old to be drinking with him. His behavior towards me was a direct contradiction, really, of what he said in his testimony. He's calling for equality and respect, but why is he not embodying that in all aspects, especially in his tone towards women? It's hypocrisy. He is being put on a pedestal for inciting systemic change, but he's really contributing to the problem of the vulgar attitude towards women. The whole nature of that doesn't sit right with me. So, brothers, it would seem that Azeem Rafiq is now feeling the heat for daring to enter the kitchen. What are your thoughts?
We shouldn't be surprised, should we? This is what happens when you try to take them down. They're inevitably going to be looking for this. The first thing I thought, and again, what the truth is, we don't know, because again, all of this is just in the media. They spin it the way they want to spin it. It's always like that. What I immediately would question, though, to start off with, is the whole racism thing with cricket was never supposed to be an Azeem Rafiq thing.
Yeah.
Remember, this is something which, if they themselves looked inwards after someone accused them of this, they should recognize this is a racism problem that needs to be solved. It should never have been. It goes beyond the person.
Yeah.
This particular case goes well beyond the person and to what is the major problem, which is racism in sport and racism in society. At that point, when you realize there's a problem, the person should go out of it. The fact that one of the major papers, and again, this isn't condoning what he said about Jews and all of these things.
Exactly.
But the fact that someone thinks, it's like someone coming out and telling you that there's major problem, we need to solve it. You agree, okay, I think we need to solve it. But now you try to incriminate that person by digging into something else. It's like you almost justifying that the other thing, the major thing, let's forget about that. Let's try and find, someone at the Times newspaper who unveiled it would have had to go, you know what? This guy is trying to expose racism, which we don't care about. Let's actually try to incriminate him because he's taking on one of our major institutions, rather than going, our major institution, this cricket club and Cricket UK and all of these things, they're racist. We need to solve that. That's a problem which is massive, and it encompasses thousands of people and it affects millions of people. Let's put that aside and let's focus on what this person sent 10 years ago on his Twitter. And even then it was a couple of comments about saying that, saying a Jew was tight for not paying for a bill or something like that.
It wasn't even a Jew.
Oh, it was just someone, isn't it? Someone who hadn't paid, and he called them a Jew or being like a Jew and that kind of thing, yeah? But imagine to put that aside and go to something like that, it just highlights what your agenda is. That's what came across to me immediately. Your agenda is you're trying to incriminate this one person because he took on one of your institutions, rather than recognizing it's the major thing it needs solving. Yeah, exactly. And that's the very first thing, and that's just made me sick to the bottom of my stomach, but not surprisingly.
I'd 100% agree with that. That's exactly how, it's not about this one person, but you're right. They made it about him so that they can now just discredit the whole story and just I know they won't brush it under the carpet because it's too big to brush under the carpet.
Yeah, exactly.
They can't because it's so big, but they're attempting to, they want to. And that goes back to what we said in that podcast, that it's systemic. It's part of the system that has these protection mechanisms that they want to protect. They don't want this to be revealed and exposed by a Muslim, right? They don't want that because they want to protect the system. They themselves won't want to be known as being racist. They don't want one of their institutions to be known as that. because of the hypocrisy this really exposes. So they will go to anything, any length possible to discredit it. But the fact and reality is, does that take away the problem? And it's just a case of what aboutism. You know, they're saying, what about this? What about he sent these messages?
Yeah, exactly.
Who cares? I mean, I'm not saying they're wrong, right? But what does that? How's that got any link to the actual problem?
Whatever, you know, does it mean if the worst person in the world comes forward and exposes something you're doing completely wrong, you solve that? You don't go, oh, what about, like you say, what about this other thing? You know, deal with the problem. Just to add as well, some more stuff came out as part, you know, when he spoke in front of the judge, we should mention some of that, isn't it? Because some of the other, you know, expose that came out about, you know, them trying to force alcohol down his throat, them calling all the Pakistani players by a name like just, I think it was Kevin or something, which was the name of someone's dog and stuff like that, and forcing them all to sit in a corner or in one side of the changing room together. What about, you know, all of this stuff all of a sudden, because of this anti-Semitic claims and because of this woman coming out and saying this stuff, all of a sudden, all of that being somewhat, it won't be, you're right, it won't be brushed under the carpet, but it is all of a sudden the limelight has moved, and that's what
I think basically, I think in regards to the issue of racism in the cricket, that's something now which cannot be taken back. And the reason why is because of all these other people that came out, like Tina Best and stuff like that, who backed it up, right? So that's something now which they can't roll back on. To me, it seems like this is a punishment for this guy to, you know, moving out of line, right? Because even the issue with that woman saying, oh, you know, I'm surprised why he's saying they forced me to drink, but here this guy was drinking on the airplane, right? So again, I think it's a punishment, and maybe it's like more of a lesson for anyone else in the future, right? That if you dare to come out like this, you know, then this is what's gonna happen. Because like you said, Rashid, it's a really good point. Someone has had to think. There's a guy who's come out. He's accused of racism to the Yorkshire club, right? He almost took his life. His child died. He was in a deep, like, a low place. Tina Best came out. Other people came out. There was actually, you know, that fast bowler for England used to be the big guy, chubby guy. He was actually a very good friend of mine. He goes, look, I know this guy was basically in the gutters, right?
Oh, Darren Gough.
Darren Gough, that's right. But someone's to actually think, you know what? Forget what this guy's been through. Let me see if we can find any dirt, right? Actively, it's not like these things fell out. Actively, let's find some dirt to discredit him. That just goes to show what's happened to society. And there's one last point that I want to touch, because I think you guys have mentioned the most. The last point as well is that I think, just say he made anti-Jewish comments. Just say the guy was speaking to an underage girl, even though she said she was 17, right? How is he supposed to know she was 16, right? He was drinking, whatnot. Just say he's racist. Let's say Azeem Rafiq is racist. We're saying this is a systemic problem.
Yeah.
We're saying that people who live in this system, no matter what color you're from, you will discriminate against other people. It may be Pakistani versus black people. It may, you know, this is something which is, and the issue to do with the Jews, if you look at Europe during the world wars and stuff like that, a lot of the propaganda against the Jews was that they were stingy, they were tight, they were the guys who hoarded the money, right? So normally English people have said that, and I've heard this myself during my time, that, you know, oh, don't be a Jew, right? It's just something which is against Jewish people. So if people are being brought up in the same society, right, are they not going to carry these same prejudice about Irish people, about this and that? You know, when we grew up, the Irish people were the ones who were, you know, picked on. If there was a joke about the Irishman, the Scotsman, and the Englishman, it was always the Irishman who was the one who was stupid.
Yeah.
Did this not formulate in your mind that the Irish are the other, the Irish are stupid, the Irish are this? So again, if we're talking about this is systemic, then yeah, Azeem Rafiq may be a racist, right? But how did he become racist? Could it not be by living in a society which promotes this?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really good way to look at it. And like you said, totally bigger than Azeem. And have you ever heard the term the court of public opinion? Right. So the court of public opinion is basically where the decisions get made. Yes, you've got a legal court, which is more important, but the court of public opinion is how opinions are shaped. And the media is there to shape the court of public opinion. That's where the decisions and ruling, the judgments are made. And that's why I feel like these stories that they're digging out is to sway that court of public opinion. They want people to now think, oh, he's got no right to speak about this because he said this, this, and this. So then it just discredits it.
Imagine now he goes to
people discredits it.
Bro, imagine now he goes to the next panel.
Exactly.
How can he even go there?
Yeah, but no, I actually think the point you made, Madge, is something that everybody needs to take on board, because all of a sudden, if the next Azeem Rafiq goes, I'm going to speak out, he's going to be thinking, oh, what things did I do in my past? Even if I don't agree with we all made mistakes in our past. We'll have to start thinking, what that thing that I did, which I regret that I did, I better not speak out against authority, because all that authority will do is bring up the past. But you're like thinking, to make things better, I need to speak out. But, all of a sudden, I need to shut up just because I might have made a mistake. Or say even someone in my family made a mistake or something. You start to have to think that I'm not going to speak out because there's someone in this establishment who, will dig up dirt on something somewhere, or even forget digging up dirt, make up stuff to try and discredit me. So all of a sudden, it forces that idea of, just shut up and live by the way we want you to live.
And it goes, like, I know I'm bringing up Sirah a lot, but it goes back to Sirah in that the Messenger of Islam, he was speaking the truth. Because they tried to challenge him and they knew they'd fail because they can't challenge him because it's the truth, they lied about him, they slandered him, they called him a magician, a liar, they called him all sorts. They told people not to listen to him because they wanted to discredit him. They wanted to discredit his message. I'm not saying Azeem Rafiq is on the noble mission here and it's not comparable, but it's comparable in the sense of what the reaction is. Anyone who wants to fight for justice, for truth, there's barriers put in front of them. There's lies and slanderous claims put against them because they don't want, like I said, it's the in Arabic you call it the authority, what do you call it, the term, but basically the authority, the system. They want to stop you from questioning that. And the authority isn't just a government. The authority are their tools as well. So the media is part of it, the institution is part of it. And that's why you call it institutional racism, because it's deeper than people. It's not just one person saying this to Azeem Rafiq or that one case. It's deeper. It's the system and the rules itself that actually allow and enable Islamophobia, racism, whatever you may call it.
Yeah. No, good points, man. And the only thing I'll sort of end on is the fact that it's not a person who was challenging a particular cricket club. He was challenging part of the society, because remember, racism isn't just within the actual the people playing the sport. It's a problem with even the fan base. It's a whole thing. It's sports is huge in the West. And he challenged it, and like I said, you'd have to be masoom, you'd have to be an angel, right, to challenge the system, because everyone has probably said something once in their life, right, which they thought was being deleted, or basically they went on some website, or they delete the cookies and the cache and they thought that's the end of it. But you know what, they will pull something out, right? So I think
they're going to pull out these podcasts about us.
100%, no, 100%. That's how it is, isn't it? That's how it is, bro. And it's a good point that Rash said, and it'll be a good point to finish the podcast on that. They want to really create a scenario where you just don't speak up, because of the fact that your cause may be noble, but that the people who speak up, if they've got anything in their past which can be used, it will be used, whether it's family ties and whatever, and people are just not going to be. Because this guy now is probably going to definitely fall into depression. He's probably come out worse than he was before, right? Because he tried to challenge the system. He turned out to be anti-Semitic and racist and a pedophile. Yeah. So, you know what I mean? This guy came out to be worse than he started off with, right? So I think that's a really good point, that the way they want to set that scene. But as we know, enjoying the good, forbidding the evil is part of the Muslims' armory, something which we should do injustice against whoever it's against. we speak out against, and we leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So inshallah, guys, you know what? We'll end the podcast on that. Really big jazakallah khair again to have you guys on such short notice, but really picked up on a lot of you guys said really good angles, and I'm sure our listeners and those watching the podcast will definitely benefit. And for those listening, you can catch the podcast on all popular podcast platforms under the name the Islamic Vibes Podcast, and also you can watch it on my YouTube channel Path to Revival. And inshallah, on that note, brothers, hopefully see you on the next one, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.